The first thing Captain Theo Hayes noticed was the silence, not the expected hum of a ship's engine or the familiar chatter of his crew over the comms. This was a profound, oppressive silence, the kind that settled deep into the bones and whispered unsettling truths. His helmet's visor, still smeared with condensation from the violent drop into whatever this place was, reflected only the dim amber light spilling from overhead conduits. The air was heavy, tinged with the sharp bite of oxidizing metal and an acrid undertone of decay. Theo lay motionless, his body pressed against the cold floor of an unfamiliar corridor. The sleek, utilitarian panels of his ship, the Icarus, were gone, replaced by walls encrusted with strange organic filigree that glowed faintly, pulsating in sync with an unseen rhythm. A subtle vibration coursed through the ground beneath him, a heartbeat that didn't belong. He forced himself upright, muscles groaning in protest. Memories of the last few moments aboard the Icarus came in jagged fragments, the emergency alarms screaming, the stars warping and fragmenting into impossible geometries, the desperate yells of his crew before everything dissolved into blinding light. Where were they now? Theo activated the interface on his suit. The holographic display sputtered, distorted, before stabilizing enough to show a single status report. Critical malfunction. Unknown location. Crew unaccounted for. He exhaled sharply. Alone then, or so it seemed. Theo scanned his surroundings. The corridor stretched endlessly in either direction, its walls marred with claw-like scratches that suggested something had tried and failed to escape. The glowing filigree writhed, almost imperceptibly, as if aware of his presence. He reached for his sidearm, its comforting weight a reassurance in an otherwise alien environment. "Hayes to Icarus," he called, his voice hoarse, dry from the recycled air in his helmet. Static. "Anyone copy?" More static. He cursed under his breath. Then, faintly, from somewhere far down the corridor, came a sound. It wasn't mechanical, nor was it natural. It was a low, resonant hum that seemed to reverberate within him, bypassing his ears entirely. His pulse quickened, and instinctively, he flicked off the helmet light, plunging himself into near-total darkness. The faint glow of the walls became his only guide. As he crept forward, the hum grew louder, more defined, resolving into something almost musical. There was a rhythm to it, alien but deliberate, and it made the hair on the back of his neck rise. Theo moved cautiously, his boots barely scraping the ground, his hand gripping the sidearm like a lifeline. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. Suspended at its center was a massive spherical object, a lattice of blackened metal and shimmering energy that pulsed in time with the hum. Surrounding it were what appeared to be consoles, though their design was incomprehensible, an intricate blend of machinery and organic structures, each pulsating with the same faint light as the walls. And then he saw her. At first, she was just a silhouette, standing near one of the consoles, her figure illuminated by the sphere's eerie glow. But as Theo stepped closer, the details became clear. The figure was humanoid, but distinctly alien. Her skin glimmered, catching the light in shifting hues of silver and deep violet. Her eyes, impossibly large and bright, locked onto his, and he froze. "Who are you?" he demanded, raising his weapon. His voice echoed in the cavernous chamber, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head as if studying him, before finally speaking. Her voice was soft, lilting, and carried an undertone that made it feel less like sound and more like a thought planted directly in his mind. "You do not belong here." Theo tightened his grip. "No kidding. Where's my crew? What is this place?" Her expression didn't change, though her gaze flicked briefly to the sphere behind her. "They are gone. This place was not meant for you." "What does that mean?" Theo snapped. His frustration boiled over, fueled by the disorienting environment and her cryptic answers. "Start explaining or I—" "You will do nothing," she interrupted, her tone cool, almost dismissive. She stepped closer, and Theo's instinct screamed at him to fire, to back away, to do something. But her presence held him rooted in place. There was something about her, something ancient, powerful, and profoundly unsettling. "The station is failing," she said, her voice calm but carrying an urgency that belied her composure. "And if we do not act, it will take us with it." Theo stared at her, 1,000 questions colliding in his mind. "What do you mean, failing? Where are we? Who—" A deep rumble shook the chamber, cutting him off. The sphere pulsed violently, and the glowing filigree on the walls flared brightly before dimming again. The hum became a piercing whine, and Theo's suit warned of a massive power surge nearby. "We are out of time," the woman said, stepping past him toward the corridor he had come from. "Follow me, or die." Theo hesitated, torn between his instincts to distrust her and the sheer pragmatism of survival. Then the chamber shook again, more violently this time, and the floor beneath his feet cracked, spilling wisps of glowing vapor into the air. He followed. As they ran, Theo's mind churned with unanswered questions. Who was this alien woman? What was this station? And why, deep in his gut, did he feel as though stepping onto it had set something catastrophic into motion? The answers, he knew, would come, but not without a price. Theo's boots echoed loudly as he sprinted through the darkened hallways, the pulse of the dying station reverberating beneath his feet. The woman, Calith, she had called herself, moved ahead with an unsettling grace, her long strides unbothered by the debris and malfunctioning systems that seemed to reach out and grab at his legs, tugging at him like the desperate hands of ghosts. He couldn't keep up. Not in terms of speed, no. It was her effortless control over the situation that unsettled him, the way she navigated the station as if she had lived here for centuries, the way she made every turn and every movement look deliberate, like she knew this place better than anyone. Too well, Theo thought, his mind brimming with questions he had yet to voice. The corridor before him bent in impossible angles, twisting around corners that seemed to stretch and contract, as though the walls were alive. The glowing filigree on the surfaces pulsed rhythmically, casting shifting shadows that played tricks on his eyes. Despite the urgency of their flight, the very environment felt wrong. "Where are we going?" Theo finally demanded, catching up with her, the words tumbling out before he could filter them. He hadn't intended to speak so sharply, but the frustration, the weight of his confusion, made it impossible to keep quiet any longer. Calith slowed, but didn't stop. She turned her head just slightly, her luminous eyes reflecting an emotion he couldn't quite place. Perhaps amusement, perhaps something darker. "You will not understand where we are," she replied cryptically, her voice calm as though they were discussing the weather rather than running from an unseen threat. "Not yet." Theo's jaw tightened. "Then explain something. Where's my crew? Why did the station malfunction? You said—" "I said we are running out of time." She interrupted him, the edge of her voice sharpening. "Do not waste it with pointless questions." Theo's hands clenched into fists. He had been in space long enough to know that nothing was pointless when it came to survival, but Calith's response only seemed to solidify the distance between them. She wasn't sharing her knowledge, her secrets. She wasn't interested in giving him a reason to trust her. He was just a tool, an asset if he was lucky. Ahead, the corridor split, one passage leading to the left, another to the right. Calith didn't hesitate. She veered left, walking at an unhurried pace despite the station's systems groaning louder and louder in protest. The strain was palpable. Theo quickened his pace, following closely, his eyes darting from one side to the other. "What's the real reason my crew's gone?" he asked. His voice carried, almost accusatory now. He knew he sounded desperate, but he couldn't stop. "You know something. Tell me. Did you have something to do with it?" She froze. For a moment, the air seemed to hang still, thick with tension. Theo's breath caught in his throat. He had gone too far. His instincts had shoved him into a corner, and now there was a bitter taste in his mouth, the taste of 1,000 wrong decisions. But when she turned, her eyes, those eyes, held no malice, only something darker, a quiet, endless sadness. "No," she said softly, I did not kill your crew, but they are not lost, Captain. Her voice dropped lower, and when she spoke again, the words carried a different weight. They are gone because of them. Them. The word lingered between them, its implications much heavier than anything he had expected. Who? Theo demanded, but before Calith could answer, the walls began to tremble once more. The station groaned violently, shaking them both from the disorienting force of the disturbance. It was coming. The enemy Calith had warned him about, the obsidian choir. A sharp screech filled the air. The sound was raw, inhuman, a mix of grinding metal and an unsettling, almost musical chant. Theo's pulse spiked. What the hell was that? He hissed, heart racing. Calith didn't answer at first. She was already moving, her eyes scanning the walls, her mind evidently on something beyond the immediate threat. Theo's instincts screamed at him to follow, but every fiber of his being was wired for a fight. Calith, he called again, but she was already ahead of him, eyes locked on a panel near the ceiling. She reached it before Theo could stop her, tapping at the console with a precision that made his jaw tighten. We need to go, she said abruptly, her tone flat, but there was a flicker of urgency behind her words that hadn't been there before. Now. Without another word, she turned, pushing open a nearby hatch. Theo barely had time to react before she slipped through, vanishing into the darkened space beyond. The sound of the screeching chorus grew louder, echoing down the hallway like the scream of something dead, something ancient. He had no choice. Theo followed her into the dark. Inside the new room, the atmosphere shifted. It was smaller, more cramped, and the air felt thick with the stench of mold and age. The room, like the rest of the station, looked abandoned. Shattered glass crunched underfoot as he moved cautiously through the dim light. Calith was already at a console across the room, her slender fingers dancing across a screen of incomprehensible symbols. Theo couldn't make sense of any of it, but the desperation in her posture was enough to tell him that something catastrophic was about to happen, and soon. Talk to me, Calith, Theo pressed, trying to keep his voice steady. What do you know about the choir? What are they? She didn't answer immediately. She only tapped faster, harder, as if she could make the machinery bend to her will. Finally, her lips parted, and her words came with a weight that dropped like a stone. The obsidian choir is not a species, Captain, she said. It is a hunger, a force that devours everything it touches, consuming not just the flesh but the very essence of those it hunts. The Vakri were its first victims, your crew. She trailed off, her expression shifting, darkening. They were theirs. Theo's mind raced. You mean? Yes. She stood up, turning her face to him, her expression grim. They were taken. A cold chill ran through Theo, deeper than the chill of space. There was no time left. No time to understand. Only time to act. The question now wasn't whether he could trust Calith. The question was whether he could survive long enough to figure out how to stop what was coming. The air felt heavier now, charged with an invisible force. Theo could almost taste it on his tongue, an acrid tang of ozone, the weight of something immense pushing down upon them. The walls around them creaked, groaned, and shuddered as if the station itself was struggling against an unseen predator, fighting to hold itself together. Calith stood motionless before the terminal, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface, with a calmness that seemed entirely out of place, given the chaos unfolding around them. Theo stood behind her, heart pounding, mind racing. The words she had spoken, about the obsidian choir, about the fate of his crew, kept reverberating in his thoughts like an echo in a vast, empty chamber. They were taken. His crew had been taken. What did that even mean? How could they, his crew, be turned into something else? Calith, he began, his voice a mix of frustration and desperation. What exactly are you saying? You said the choir takes everything. Her voice was quiet, barely above a whisper, but the gravity of it made Theo pause, a cold weight settling in his chest. She turned to face him, her large, alien eyes reflecting a depth of sorrow that was almost unbearable. "They do not just take bodies, Captain. They consume souls, the essence, the very will of those they find. The obsidian choir does not kill. It erases. It leaves behind nothing but an empty shell, devoid of purpose, of memory, of life." The words hit Theo like a physical blow. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came. His eyes darted to the darkening hallway behind them, as if expecting to see the shadows of his lost crew emerging from the corners. Could they have? Number. That didn't make sense. Not yet. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus. Then why did they leave us? Why not take us too? Kalith's expression was unreadable for a moment, but then she stepped closer, her voice low. "Because they are close. Too close." She pointed toward the terminal, and for the first time, Theo noticed the frantic pulse of the lights on the console, flickering erratically. "They are already aware of us." A sickening feeling knotted in Theo's stomach. "We need to leave. We need to fix the Icarus, get back to the ship." "The Icarus is gone." Kalith's words were firm, final. "The force that hunts us, it will not allow you to leave, not unless you understand what we are dealing with, and you must understand quickly, or we will be its next victims." A sound then, distant at first, like the deep rumbling of thunder in a storm, but it was no storm. It was a sound Theo had only ever heard in the deepest, most terrifying corners of space, the shrill hum of something vast, something far too powerful. The choir. Theo's pulse quickened. "It's coming. What do we do now?" His mind was a whirlwind of fragmented thoughts, but Kalith's response was like a cold bucket of water thrown over him. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she moved to a far corner of the room and began pulling at a series of cables that connected the walls to a small embedded device. Her movements were swift, practiced. As she worked, Theo's eyes darted between the corridor they had just come from and the terminal in front of them. The walls groaned again, this time with an intensity that made his skin prickle. The station was alive with anticipation, as if it too feared the coming storm. "Kalith!" Theo started again, but this time she held up a hand, cutting him off. "Listen," she said, her voice strained with urgency. "The only way we stand a chance is if we can activate the central core, but that will only be possible if we can override the station systems first. The choir knows we are here. If we try to escape without shutting down their tracking, they will find us. They will find you, Captain." Theo felt the blood drain from his face. A cold knot formed in his stomach. "You've known how to stop them all along, haven't you? Why didn't you tell me?" His voice rose without him meaning it to. Anger flared inside him, mixing with the terror that had been building ever since they had arrived on this cursed station. Kalith paused. She looked at him with a calmness that only heightened his sense of urgency. "Because you are not ready," she said, almost too quietly. "You cannot fight them the way you fight other threats. The Obsidian Choir is not just a war machine. They are something else. A force of nature unstoppable once they begin to consume. If we are to survive, you need to understand what they are, who they were." The walls shuddered violently, and Theo's gaze snapped toward the entrance of the room. The sound of the choir's hum was louder now, closer, a maddening resonance that crawled beneath his skin. Something was coming. Something that didn't need to breathe, didn't need to see, but knew. Kalith turned back to the terminal, typing furiously. "I will need a few minutes," she said, her voice steady but tight with the pressure of time. "During that time, I will ask you to trust me." Theo felt his breath hitch in his throat. He could hear the sound now, echoing through the station like a warning bell. His mind screamed at him to act, to fight, to do something. But his body refused to move. He couldn't tear his gaze away from Kalith. Her focus was absolute, her every move calculated and purposeful. It was as if she was channeling all of the station's energies into one final push. "What are you doing?" Theo finally demanded, his voice barely above a whisper, though his body was trembling. Calith's fingers moved across the terminal with the speed of someone who had been here before. "You are not the first human I have encountered," she said cryptically, "and you will not be the last, but you are the first to see." Theo's breath caught in his throat. He had no time to ask her what she meant, no time to argue. The air shifted. The shadows in the room began to stretch, to grow longer. Theo's eyes darted around, but nothing in the room had changed except for the oppressive weight of an unknown presence now pressing in on him. Then, with a single final keystroke, Calith's expression shifted. Her lips parted as if in surprise. Her eyes went wide. "Not again," she whispered, her voice a tremor of disbelief. Theo's pulse thundered in his ears. "Calith, what?" Then it hit. The wave of energy that tore through the station like 100 storms colliding in a single instant. A pulse of blinding light, so intense that it pierced through the walls of the station itself, and with it came the undeniable feeling that whatever they had been trying to escape was no longer just hunting them. It was already here. Calith's gaze locked onto his, and the truth settled between them like a weight too heavy to bear. They were not alone anymore. The station trembled once again. This time, it wasn't a subtle vibration. It was a violent shake, a quake that seemed to reverberate through the very bones of the place. The walls moaned in protest, metal straining against the pressure. Theo gripped the console in front of him, steadying himself as the lights flickered, plunging the room into an eerie strobe-like effect. He could feel the change in the air, the thick, suffocating presence that seemed to weigh down on him like a physical thing. Calith, however, stood perfectly still, her eyes locked onto the terminal's flashing screens. She didn't flinch as the station groaned, its systems failing in the wake of the pulse she had triggered. Every part of him screamed to act, to do something, anything, to prepare for what was coming. But he didn't know where to begin. "Calith!" he called out, his voice barely cutting through the low hum of the room. "What the hell did you do?" Her face was bathed in the pale light of the terminal, but her expression was as unreadable as ever. Her lips parted, but she didn't speak right away. Instead, she let the silence stretch, allowing the tension to build between them like a taut wire. Then, finally, she met his gaze. "I have activated the core override," she said, her voice low but firm. "We no longer have time to wait. We have to go." Theo's stomach churned. He didn't understand. None of this made sense. "Go? Where? What does that even mean?" She took a step toward him, her movement slow but deliberate. Her eyes never left his, as if she could see right through him, unraveling his every thought. "The choir is here, Captain. You've already felt its touch. You've heard its song. Now you will hear its voice." He recoiled slightly, the implications of her words sinking in. "You're talking like it's something alive, like a creature." Calith nodded, her face pale in the flickering light. "It is. But not in the way you think. It is not a creature of flesh and blood. It is something far older, far more dangerous. And it is not alone." Theo's heart skipped a beat. He moved closer to her, his body rigid with disbelief. "You're saying the choir is just the beginning? That there's more of them?" Her eyes darkened, her expression grim. "There was a time, long before your people had even begun to explore the stars, when the Vakri ruled the galaxy. We were masters of technology, creators of ships, of weapons, of miracles." She paused, the weight of her words hanging heavy between them. "We thought we had conquered everything, that we were invincible." Theo's mind raced, trying to process what she was saying. He'd seen the remnants of her people, crumbling ruins, abandoned ships, and relics of a once great civilization. But this was something else entirely. "The obsidian choir destroyed us," Calith continued, her voice thick with something Theo couldn't quite place. Regret, maybe, or perhaps guilt. "But they did not come alone. The choir is a part of something greater. Something that is waking now, in the dark places of the universe, and it will not stop, not until everything is consumed. A chill ran through Theo as her words sank in. So what? You're telling me we're just supposed to sit here and wait for it to kill us too? No. Kaleth's eyes sharpened. There is a way to stop them, but it requires a sacrifice. A choice. Theo's pulse quickened. A choice? What kind of choice? She stepped back, her gaze flickering briefly to the terminal as if checking something. Her fingers hovered above the keys, but she didn't press anything. Instead, she turned to face him fully, her expression unreadable. The station's core, the heart of this place, holds the power to end the choir, but to do so, we would need to release the energy that has been locked inside for centuries. It is a weapon of unimaginable force. Theo's mind raced as he tried to make sense of what she was saying. A weapon, he echoed. You're saying we have the power to destroy them right here, right now? Kaleth nodded. Yes, but the energy inside the core, it is not just a weapon. It is a force that will consume everything. The station, the ship, us. It will destroy everything in its path. A cold shiver ran through Theo. The choice she was talking about, he could feel it, the weight of it, pressing down on him, suffocating him. He wasn't ready for this. None of this made sense. They had barely even begun to understand what was happening. And now Kaleth was asking him to destroy everything in order to survive? But if we don't, Kaleth said, her voice soft but insistent, they will come. And when they do, there will be nothing left. No place to hide, no future to save. The choir will erase it all. Theo's chest tightened. He looked at her, his mind a blur of indecision. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like a vice. What do you want from me? Kaleth's lips curled into a sad, knowing smile. I want you to choose. I want you to make the sacrifice. She turned back to the terminal, her fingers hovering over the keys once more. The station shuddered again, the walls groaning in protest, as if it were aware of the choice they were facing. Theo stood there, caught in the silence that followed. His heart pounded in his chest as the full enormity of the situation hit him. This was it. The moment he had been dreading. The moment when everything he had fought for, everything he had known, would either be lost or changed forever. A sound like thunder rumbled through the station, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to come from every corner of the station at once. The choir was closing in. They could feel it. They could hear it. And there was no more time. I can't do it, Theo said, his voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. I can't make that choice. Not alone. Kaleth didn't turn back. She simply nodded, her expression resigned. Then we are both doomed. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Theo's mind raced, the weight of the decision crushing him. He had no idea what to do. But one thing was certain. If they didn't act, if he didn't choose, it would all be over. And it wouldn't just be the station, it wouldn't just be them, it would be the entire galaxy. The choir was coming, and there was no running from it anymore. Theo took a deep breath. He didn't have much time. He had to make the choice. Now do it, he finally said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of the sacrifice that loomed ahead. Kaleth's eyes met his, and for the first time, she seemed to truly see him, and in that moment, everything shifted. She turned back to the terminal. The countdown had begun. The air was thick with the scent of burned metal and the faint, acrid stench of ozone. Every step Theo took felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of his choices, the burden of the station's fate, and the promise of sacrifice were all pressing against him. He stood before the heart of the station, the core, the ancient flickering engine of unimaginable power. The hum of the failing systems was a constant, a dull thrum beneath his feet, but it was the silence between those beats that haunted him now. Behind him, Kaleth moved, every step as quiet as a shadow, her gaze fixed on the rapidly deteriorating terminal. The final countdown had begun. The energy was building, coiling in the veins of the station like the breath before an explosion. The choice was made. The sacrifice was inevitable. "You are certain?" Kalith asked, her voice a soft whisper, but there was no uncertainty in it. She had seen the future of the galaxy, the end that would come if they failed. And now, in this moment, her words were no more than a quiet echo against the storm that had begun to build. Theo turned to her, the weight of his decision still heavy on his chest. The loss of his crew, the endless confusion, the fear, it had all led him to this point. The decision had been his to make, but it had never felt like a choice at all. Not really. He had seen the truth, had felt the cold, consuming grip of the choir, had learned the impossible cost of survival. Now, there was only one way forward. "I have to," he said simply, his voice rough but certain. "We both have to." Kalith studied him for a long moment, as if weighing the gravity of his words. Finally, she nodded, her expression unreadable. "Then we end it." The finality of those words was all-consuming, like the last breath of a dying star, burning away in an instant. There was no more time for hesitation. The core was already unstable, pulsing with erratic energy, its systems cracked and buckling under the pressure. It was a weapon now, not just a power source. It would either destroy them, or it would end the threat of the choir once and for all. Theo looked one last time at the station's fading life support systems, at the blinking lights and flickering screens that once held the promise of salvation. The Icarus was gone. The crew was lost. All that remained was the choice between survival and destruction, between a future and a grave. "You've been running from your past for so long, Captain," Kalith said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was sharp, almost bitter, but beneath it, there was something else. Something deeper. Something he hadn't understood until now. "Now you must face it. You will never be the same after this." Theo met her gaze, her alien eyes wide and steady, unwavering in the face of what they were about to do. He had never truly understood her people, their legacy, their fall. But now, as they stood on the precipice of a cataclysm, he finally understood the cost of survival, the price of defiance. "I'm ready," he said, though the words felt hollow as he said them. He had never felt less ready for anything in his life. But there was no more room for doubt. Kalith stepped forward, her long, elegant fingers brushing across the console, initiating the final sequence. The lights around them dimmed, flickering in a desperate strobe before plunging the room into darkness. The air felt suffocating as the core hummed with a growing intensity. The countdown continued. "Once we release this energy," Kalith said quietly, her voice steady despite the chaos around them, "there will be no going back. We will either save everything, or we will be consumed." Theo swallowed hard. There was no turning back. Behind him, the low hum of the station grew louder. A distant, inhuman resonance filled the corridors, growing stronger, closer. The choir was here. Theo could feel it now, like a pulse vibrating through the walls. They were coming, drawn by the power of the core, drawn by the beacon of energy that was about to tear the station apart. He turned back to Kalith. The alien woman, the last of her kind, stood beside him now, resolute, her face a mask of calm beneath the terror of what they were about to unleash. She had told him about the Force, about the choir, but it was only now, right here, in this moment, that he truly understood the magnitude of their threat. He had seen the aftermath of their wake, the endless, empty silence of worlds destroyed. Now, in the heart of the station, Theo realized that this was the end. There was no escape. There was no way to hide. "The choice is made," Kalith whispered, her fingers poised over the final key. "Do you wish to say goodbye?" Theo shook his head, his thoughts scattered like debris in a storm. There was nothing left to say. The choice was made. The fate of the galaxy rested on a razor's edge, and all they had was the hope that the energy within the core would be enough. The final keystroke. The core exploded. It was not an explosion of fire, but of pure, concentrated energy, an unstoppable wave of power that coursed through the station, tearing at its foundations, rending metal and systems to ash. The light was blinding, flooding every inch of the space with an intensity that could burn the mind itself. Theo staggered, his body vibrating with the force of it, and Kalith collapsed to her knees beside him, her alien features contorted in pain as the core's energy swept through her. She was no longer just an observer of the galaxy's collapse. She was part of it now, her life force linked to the last echo of her dying people. She had been the key, the last sacrifice. The station groaned, its systems finally giving way. The energy had been released, its last remnants tearing through the walls, through the void of space itself, as the choir's pulse was extinguished in an instant. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no hum, no light. Then, slowly, as if the galaxy itself was breathing once again, the power faded, the lights flickering back to life, dim and feeble but there. The station, now in ruins, was silent. And the choir, the terrible, consuming force, was gone. Theo fell to the floor beside Kalith, gasping for breath, his chest heaving with the weight of what they had just endured. His hands trembled as he reached for her, his mind numb, his body battered by the violent energy of the core's release. Kalith's eyes fluttered open, and for the first time, Theo saw something akin to peace in her gaze. She smiled faintly, her breath shallow but steady. "We did it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Theo nodded, unable to find the words. They had done it. They had survived. They had saved what was left of the galaxy, at least for now. But the cost, the price of this victory, was steep. Kalith was gone. Her people, her empire, had been erased, their memories swallowed by time, their legacy lost in the vast, cold silence of space. Theo closed his eyes, feeling the weight of it all. The loss, the sacrifice, the victory. As the station's lights flickered back to full brightness, Theo stood and looked out into the endless abyss of space. The galaxy had been spared, for now. But there would be other battles, other wars, other choices to make. The journey had ended. But for Theo Hayes, the man who had walked the edge of destruction and survived, the future was still unwritten. And there was still so much more to discover. It began with the sound of rain, soft at first, a whisper against the windows, then louder, drumming like restless fingers on glass. Alex sat in the quiet of Alya's apartment, a place he'd come to know as intimately as his own skin. Yet tonight it felt unfamiliar, like a stage set for a play he didn't understand. The rain should have been comforting, but something about the storm unsettled him. It was as if the sky itself knew what he was about to discover. Alya was late. She was never late. Alex traced his hand over the smooth surface of her kitchen counter, lingering on the faint grooves where her nails had once etched impatient circles during late-night conversations. Her presence lingered everywhere, in the neatly stacked books on astrophysics, in the faint aroma of cedarwood and jasmine from the candles she favored, and in the precise alignment of furniture that betrayed her quiet obsession with order. She was meticulous, brilliant, and impossibly perfect. Too perfect, perhaps, now that he thought about it. The thought gnawed at him like an itch he couldn't scratch. He stood, pacing the room, his eyes drifting to the far corner where a door stood half-hidden behind an oversized plant. He had never noticed it before, or maybe he had, and dismissed it as unimportant. Alya had never mentioned it, and her home was otherwise an open book, except for this one, unopened chapter. The storm surged outside as if in protest, but Alex couldn't stop himself. The door called to him, the way an unanswered question worms its way into the mind. His hand hesitated on the handle, cold and unfamiliar under his touch. It wasn't locked, which surprised him. It should have been locked. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. A faint hum vibrated the air, almost too low to hear, like the thrum of an unseen engine. Alex's heart quickened, the logical part of his mind screaming for him to turn back. But curiosity drowned out reason, and his feet moved as if they had a will of their own. The room at the bottom of the stairs was a stark contrast to the rest of Alia's minimalist apartment. Where her living space was clean, orderly, and warm, this room was chaos. The walls were lined with shelves overflowing with strange objects, spheres that pulsed faintly with an inner light, crystalline shards that shimmered in colors he couldn't name, and intricate metallic devices that seemed to hum with dormant energy. On a table in the center of the room lay a journal, its leather cover worn and cracked, the pages bulging with pressed leaves and sketches. Alex opened it hesitantly, his eyes scanning unfamiliar symbols and diagrams. One sketch caught his attention, a map of constellations that didn't match any he'd seen before, with lines connecting stars into unfamiliar shapes. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, though no one was there to answer. His fingers brushed against an orb sitting next to the journal. The moment he touched it, the hum in the room grew louder, and the orb came alive, projecting a flickering image into the air. A tall figure in a hooded cloak spoke in a language that sounded ancient and melodic, the words washing over Alex like a wave of static. Alia's voice, sharp and unexpected, shattered the spell. "Alex!" He spun around, his heart leaping into his throat. She stood at the top of the stairs, her face half hidden in shadow, but her eyes, those deep, piercing eyes, glowed faintly in the dim light. For a moment, he thought it was a trick of the flickering orb, but the glow remained, steady and unnatural. "I can explain," she said, her voice calm but tinged with something he couldn't place. Fear? Regret? He didn't know what to say. Words tangled in his throat as he gestured to the room around him. "What? What is all this? Who are you?" She descended the stairs slowly, her movements deliberate, as if each step carried the weight of 100 decisions. When she reached him, she took the journal from his hands and closed it gently, cradling it like something fragile. "I never wanted you to find out this way," she said, her voice softer now, "but you deserve the truth." Alex stepped back, his mind racing. "The truth? What truth, Alia? You're not—" He stopped himself, the words too absurd to say aloud. But the evidence was all around him, undeniable and overwhelming. "No," she said, her smile faint and sad. "I'm not." The silence that followed was suffocating. Alex's world tilted, the foundation of everything he thought he knew crumbling beneath him. "I'm not from here," she continued, gesturing vaguely toward the ceiling, as if here encompassed far more than the room, the city, or even the planet. "I've been on Earth for a long time, Alex, longer than you could imagine." He laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "You're saying you're an alien?" Alia didn't flinch. "Yes." The simplicity of her answer was what struck him most. No elaborate excuses, no frantic denials, just the truth, laid bare like an open wound. "But why? Why hide this? Why stay here?" Her gaze softened, and for a moment he saw the woman he thought he knew. "Because Earth is more important than you realize, and because, for the first time in a century, I found something worth staying for." The words hung in the air, their meaning sinking into Alex's chest like a stone. He wanted to believe her, to cling to the possibility that their connection was real. But the room around them whispered doubts, its alien artifacts speaking of secrets and lies. Outside, the storm raged on, the rain pounding against the windows like the heartbeat of a restless world. The next day, Alex woke to the muted light of dawn creeping through the blinds, its pale fingers brushing against the walls. But the sense of calm he had once found in Alia's apartment was gone, replaced by a weight he couldn't shake. The memory of the night before clung to him like a second skin, each detail sharp and invasive. Her words, the alien artifacts, the strange orb, it all felt like a dream, too fantastical to be real. But it wasn't a dream. He knew that. He rose slowly from the bed, the sheets still warm where Alia had slept beside him. Though, like everything else in this apartment, her absence was palpable. Her scent lingered faintly in the air, but the space beside him was empty, untouched. Alex dressed mechanically, as though his body were moving without his consent, driven by a need to flee from the unanswered questions and the tension that hummed in every corner of the room. He needed to clear his mind, to find something tangible, something grounded. He needed answers. He took the elevator down, the sterile hum of the building's metal walls offering no solace. The lobby was quiet, the air thick with the sound of his own breath. But just as he was about to step outside, a voice stopped him. "Alia's looking for you." It was Lyle, the building's doorman, his expression a curious mix of familiarity and something darker, a flicker of unease beneath the surface. Alex paused, glancing back at him. "What do you mean? Have you seen her?" Lyle's eyes darted toward the elevators, and for a fleeting moment, Alex saw the tension in his posture. "She's upstairs. Just be careful. I don't know what's going on, but I've been seeing things. Strange things." He lowered his voice, a conspiratorial whisper. "Not everything is what it seems here. Watch your back, Alex. People aren't who they say they are." The words echoed in Alex's mind long after he left the building. Something was wrong. He knew it instinctively, as though the very fabric of his life had been torn open to reveal a world of lies and half-truths. He couldn't shake the image of Alia's eyes the night before, the unnatural glow in them, the way she had been so calm, so detached when telling him she wasn't human. But what did that mean? What did she want from him? He could feel the pull of the unknown dragging him back to her apartment. He had to confront her again. He had to know the full truth, the real truth. As he stood before the door, his hand trembling slightly as it hovered over the handle, the weight of his decision hit him like a wave. What if there was no going back after this? What if the world he had known was nothing but a facade? His fingers curled into a fist, and for a moment, the fear of what lay beyond that door almost paralyzed him. But he turned the knob anyway. The apartment was eerily quiet, the light streaming in from the windows casting long shadows on the walls. Alia was standing by the window, her back to him, staring out at the city. The air around her seemed charged, almost vibrating with an invisible force. For a moment, Alex wasn't sure if she even noticed his presence. But then she spoke, her voice soft yet unmistakably resolute. "I knew you'd come back." She didn't turn to face him. "I need you to understand," she continued, her words deliberate, measured. "Everything I've told you is the truth, but it's only part of it. There's more you don't know, things I haven't told you because I didn't want you to be a part of it. But now it's too late." Alex felt the air in the room thicken. A low hum filled his ears, a sound so faint it might have been his imagination, but it grew louder, clearer, until it seemed to come from everywhere. The very walls felt like they were alive with it. She turned then, her gaze meeting his, and for the first time there was a flicker of something unfamiliar behind her eyes, a hint of fear, of doubt. "I'm sorry, Alex. I never meant for you to be dragged into this, but the truth is, we're not the only ones who know I'm here." Her voice trembled, but she steadied herself before continuing. "My people have been watching Earth for centuries, but they've never wanted to intervene. Until now." The words hung in the air, a chilling revelation that settled deep in Alex's chest. "Who's watching you? Who's after you?" Alia's lips pressed into a thin line as she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There are others. Factions within my species. Different groups with different agendas. They all want control over this planet, over humanity, and they don't care who gets hurt in the process." The weight of her words hit Alex like a physical blow. His mind reeled, trying to process the enormity of what she was saying. He had thought the strange objects in her apartment were merely relics of a distant past, tokens of some obscure mission, but now he understood. They were far more than that. "What do you need from me?" he asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Alia's expression softened, and for a fleeting moment, the woman he had fallen in love with was there again, the one who had smiled at him over breakfast, who had kissed him goodnight with that warmth and softness that made everything feel right in the world. But it was only for a moment, and then it was gone. "I need your trust," she said quietly. "I need you to believe in me even when you don't understand. There are people coming for us, the other factions. They're already here, and they won't stop until they find me. I can protect you, but only if you're with me. If you walk away now, you're a target just like me." Alex's mind spun, the weight of her words crushing him. Could he really believe her? Could he trust her now, after everything? There were too many unknowns, too many dangers lurking just out of sight. He wasn't ready for this. He didn't know if he could be. But as his eyes met hers, something deep within him, a gut instinct, a gut feeling, whispered that there was no going back now. Alia was in danger, and somehow that made her more real to him than ever before. A sudden, deafening crash shook the apartment, followed by the unmistakable sound of shuffling footsteps. Alex's heart jumped in his chest. They were here. Alia's eyes flashed with urgency. "Stay with me, Alex. Do not leave my side. It's the only way we'll survive this." Before Alex could respond, the door to the apartment slammed open, and shadowed figures filled the doorway. The faint hum that had lingered earlier now roared to life, vibrating through the walls, filling the space with an oppressive force. Alex's breath caught in his throat, his pulse hammering in his ears. This was real, and it was just the beginning. The moment the door slammed open, Alex's world fractured. His pulse thudded in his ears as shadowed figures flooded into the apartment, their silhouettes tall and unnaturally still. The air felt thick, heavy with the weight of something foreign, something wrong. Alia stiffened beside him, her body tense, but she didn't move. Her eyes, those alien eyes, darted from one figure to the next, calculating, calculating, calculating. Alex could feel the tension in her shoulders, the barely contained energy in the way her hands clenched at her sides. He had no idea who these people were, but one thing was clear. They were here for her. And whatever they wanted, it wasn't something he could stop. "Step aside," one of the figures commanded, his voice cold and mechanical. His words, though spoken softly, carried a power that sent a chill through the room. Alia didn't flinch, but Alex could see the way her jaw tightened, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the table. There was a flicker of something dangerous in her eyes, something ancient, and suddenly, Alex wasn't sure if he could trust her or if she was the one who needed protecting. "Not a chance," she said, her voice steady, but Alex caught the undertone of urgency in her tone. Whatever these people were, they were not the allies she had claimed. They weren't here for a peaceful negotiation. This wasn't some intergalactic misunderstanding. The man who had spoken, a tall figure with sharp, angular features, took a step forward, his hand raised as if to silence her. But before he could speak again, a voice from the back of the group cut through the thick silence, sharp and cruel. "Alia, Alia, Alia!" The voice was a hiss like smoke curling through the air. "Always running, always hiding. We didn't come for you, but here you are, again in the way." The figure who spoke stepped forward, pushing past the others with a fluid grace that made Alex's skin crawl. She was older than the others, her face gaunt, as though the years had drained the color from her skin, but her eyes, they gleamed with an otherworldly light. "It's time for you to come back, Alia. We have plans for Earth, and your little charade here has gone on long enough." Alia's expression hardened, but Alex could see the shift in her demeanor, the flicker of doubt and concern. This wasn't just an enemy. It was someone who knew her, someone she feared. "Lyra," Alia breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought you were gone. I thought you had—" "You thought wrong." The woman, Lyra, cut her off with a smirk that could have cracked the air. "You really believed you could stay hidden forever, after all these years?" She turned her gaze toward Alex then, her eyes narrowing in a predatory way. "And who is this? Another one of your little toys, Alia? Or is he something more?" The words felt like a slap across Alex's face, but it wasn't just the insult that struck him. It was the cold certainty in Lyra's voice. She wasn't asking. She was stating a fact. Alex's chest tightened, his mind racing. What did she know? What had Alia been hiding from him? He stepped back instinctively, his body reacting before his mind could catch up. "You need to leave," Alia said, her voice low but firm. "This isn't about Earth. It never was. You don't get to take it. Not this time." Lyra's laugh was a harsh, cruel sound, and her eyes gleamed with something darker. "You still don't get it, do you? This planet was never meant to be yours. It was never meant to be anyone's. But your kind, you keep it alive, and you've kept it hidden. The Council is growing impatient." She turned to the figures behind her, nodding once, and they stepped forward as one. Before Alex could react, a wave of pressure seemed to crush down on him, a sudden force that made it difficult to breathe. He staggered backward, gripping the edge of the table to steady himself, but it felt as though the room itself was pushing against him. It was as if the very air had thickened, pulling him down, suffocating him with its weight. Alia's hand shot out, and in an instant the pressure vanished, leaving Alex gasping for air. He looked at her, wide-eyed, and for the first time he realized just how little he knew about the woman he had trusted. "Enough!" Alia snapped, her voice suddenly commanding. "You think you can just come here and claim Earth for yourselves? I won't let you." The figures surrounding them shifted, their eyes flicking between each other, hesitant. There was a moment of silence, a crackling tension in the air that seemed to stretch until it could break at any second. Alia wasn't backing down. She was ready for whatever came next. Lyra's face twisted with something between amusement and anger. "You still don't understand, do you? You're not in control, Alia. You never were. This isn't just about your mission. This is about something much bigger. Earth is the center of the war, and you're too caught up in your little games to see that." The words hit Alex like a physical blow, his mind racing. The center of the war? What war? "War?" he managed to rasp, his voice hoarse. He looked to Alia, his heart pounding in his chest. "What does she mean? What's going on? What are you involved in?" Alia didn't answer immediately, her gaze shifting between him and Lyra. The air in the room crackled with an invisible tension, as though the very fabric of the apartment was about to rip apart. Alia's shoulders slumped slightly, a sign of fatigue, or was it resignation? "There's no time for this," Lyra said, her voice cold and final. "You've been playing this game long enough, Alia. The Council is tired of waiting. The others are already gathering, and they're coming for you, for us. There's no hiding anymore." The weight of her words hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Alia's eyes flared with an intensity Alex had never seen before, and in that moment, he realized that he had no idea what kind of woman he had been living with. He had never seen this side of her, this warrior, this person who had been part of something much larger, something dangerous, something that had now come to his doorstep. Alia's voice was low, controlled, but there was an edge to it that made Alex's blood run cold. "If you think you can take this planet, you're going to have to go through me first." And with those words, everything changed. The figures in the room shifted, preparing for a confrontation that Alex could sense was coming, and coming fast. He was no longer just a witness to this unfolding war. He was now part of it, whether he liked it or not. And the worst part? He wasn't sure whose side he was on anymore. The apartment felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick and volatile, filled with an unspoken promise of violence. Alex stood frozen, his heart racing, his eyes darting between Alia and Lyra. The others, silent and unmoving, watched him, their eyes gleaming like predatory animals, waiting for the moment to strike. Every muscle in Alex's body screamed for action, but his mind refused to cooperate. He was caught between two worlds, the one he had known, where love and trust were simple, and the one that had unfolded in front of him, alien and incomprehensible. Alia's voice broke through the silence, soft yet filled with determination. "This isn't what I wanted, Alex. None of this was meant to happen. Her eyes found his, and for the first time in hours, he saw a flicker of vulnerability in them. Something raw and human that tugged at his heart. It wasn't just about the alien conflict anymore. It was about her and him, and the love they had built in secret, hidden beneath the layers of lies and half-truths. "I never asked for this," she continued, her voice steady, but carrying the weight of a century's worth of secrets. "But you're involved now. You can't walk away from this. You need to make a choice, Alex. A choice that will define everything." His stomach churned, a cold knot tightening within him. A choice. He had never imagined the kind of decision that lay before him now. This wasn't about choosing between right and wrong, or love and duty. It was a choice between survival and destruction, between two worlds that seemed destined to collide, and in the middle of it stood him, one man, lost and confused, holding the weight of impossible decisions in his hands. Lyra's mocking voice sliced through his thoughts. "You think you have time to choose? You think you have time to save her? Your world is already being pulled into the void, Alex. The Council will take it. It's already decided. The only question left is whether you'll live long enough to see it." Alia's face tightened with anger, but she didn't respond. Instead, her eyes locked onto Alex's, and for a moment, the room seemed to fade into nothing. It was just the two of them, connected by a bond so deep that it transcended the chaos around them. "I'm not just saving myself, Alex," Alia said softly. "I'm saving you. All of you." She stepped forward, her hand reaching out toward him. "Please, you have to trust me. I need you with me. I can't do this alone." Alex's mind raced, 1,000 questions flooding his thoughts. If Alia was telling the truth, if she truly wasn't human, if she had been hiding among them for so long, then what else had she kept from him? What other truths had she hidden? Was it possible that everything he had believed about their relationship, about their love, was built on lies? But then, in the midst of his turmoil, a single thought pierced through the fog. "I love her." It wasn't a perfect love, and it wasn't a simple one, but it was real. In every way that mattered, it was real. A voice interrupted his thoughts. This time, it was one of the figures in the back of the room, their voice tinged with impatience. "Enough talk," the figure growled, his hand reaching toward the glowing orb in his palm. The device pulsed with a low hum, and Alex felt an overwhelming wave of pressure crash into him. His breath caught, his vision blurring as the force closed in around him. "Get down!" Alia shouted, pushing him out of the way just as the air snapped with an electric charge. The blast struck the wall behind them with a thunderous crash, sending debris scattering in all directions. Alia didn't wait to see if he was okay. She was already on her feet, her movements swift and fluid, her eyes locked on Lyra and her followers. Alex scrambled to his feet, the realization crashing over him. This wasn't just a confrontation, this was war. "Get out of here, Alex," Alia ordered, her voice firm. "Go, now." "But, now, Alex, I can't protect you if you're here." He hesitated, his legs frozen beneath him. He wanted to stay, to fight, to prove that he could help her, that he could protect her. But her eyes, fierce and determined, told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't his fight. At least not yet. With a final glance, he turned and bolted for the door. The apartment's hallway seemed endless as he sprinted down it, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. His heart raced in his chest, panic rising in his throat. Where was he going? What was he running to? Alia had told him to leave, but his mind kept screaming at him to turn around, to go back. She needed him. He couldn't leave her behind. But as he reached the building's exit, he was stopped by a sharp voice. "You're making a mistake." Alex froze in his tracks, his breath shallow. It was Lyra's voice, smooth and cold, laced with contempt. Turning slowly, Alex's eyes widened as he saw Lyra standing at the entrance, her face unreadable. Her eyes glowed with an intensity that made the air around her shimmer with a strange energy. You think you can save her, don't you? Lyra's lips curled into a smirk. You think you can change the course of this war. But you're nothing more than a pawn, Alex. A disposable piece in a game you don't even understand. Alex felt his stomach twist in fury. Shut up, he muttered, his voice raw. You don't know anything about me. Oh, I know, she replied, her voice dripping with mockery. I know exactly who you are. You're her weakness, and the worst part is, you don't even know it. Her words hit harder than any blow, and Alex staggered back, his mind reeling. Weakness? What did she mean? Alya's weakness? But before he could react, the ground trembled beneath him. The building around him seemed to groan, as though it were alive, a deep, resonating hum that sent shivers down his spine. Something was happening, something big. The floor cracked, a jagged line of destruction spreading toward him, and he realized with sudden horror, the building was coming down. The forces beyond his control were crashing into his world, and there was no escape. Alex's eyes snapped to Lyra, who was watching him with an almost pitying expression. You have one choice left, Alex. You can run, or you can fight. But understand this. No matter what you choose, it's already over. It's too late. The building trembled again, and Alex was faced with a decision: to flee and live in fear, or to stand and fight, to protect the woman he loved, even if it meant sacrificing everything. The ground cracked wide open, and the choice was made for him. The rubble from the collapsing building still smoldered around Alex as he stood amidst the wreckage, his chest heaving with exhaustion. The world had fractured into something unrecognizable, and all he could do was hold on to the remnants of the life he thought he knew. Dust filled the air, and the faint echo of distant sirens pierced through the haze of chaos. He was no longer sure whether he had just witnessed the end of his world or the beginning of a much darker, more dangerous one. He glanced around, searching, but the figures, the silent, shadowed people who had come for Alya, were gone. In their wake, they had left nothing but destruction. The concrete had cracked beneath the pressure of forces he couldn't comprehend. The strange energy he had felt in the building was gone now, leaving him feeling hollow, like something vital had been taken. He took a step forward, his legs unsteady beneath him, his mind still clouded with the choices he had made in those last moments. I have to find her. He pushed through the debris, his thoughts a storm of guilt and confusion. He had fled, he had left her behind, he had chosen fear, and now Alya was gone. He reached the street, his heart pounding as he stumbled past the collapsed walls of the building. The city was in chaos. People ran in all directions, sirens screamed in the distance, and the sky above was tainted with a strange, unnatural glow. The battle had already begun, the cosmic war that had always been hovering just out of sight, and he had been too late. But then a flicker of movement caught his eye. He turned sharply, his heart leaping in his chest. There, standing in the shadows, was a figure he knew all too well. Alya. She was standing perfectly still, watching him with a kind of intensity that was almost frightening. Her eyes, those alien eyes, were filled with something he couldn't place, a mixture of regret and determination. She didn't move, didn't speak, but the gravity of her presence pulled him forward. Alya, he whispered, his voice cracking with a mixture of relief and fear. I thought you were gone. She stepped into the light then, her movements slow but purposeful, her gaze unwavering. Her face was drawn, weary, but the fire in her eyes was unmistakable. She was still Alya, the woman he loved, but not entirely. You left, she said, her voice calm but edged with a sorrow he hadn't expected. You chose to run. Alex flinched at her words, the weight of them sinking deep into his chest. He had failed her. He had run when she needed him most. I didn't know what else to do, he said, his voice rough with regret. I was scared, Alya. I didn't know what I was supposed to be, what you were, what any of this was about. Alya studied him silently for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then finally she nodded. I understand. I never wanted to put you in that position, But this isn't about fear anymore, Alex. It's about survival, about making the choice that will shape everything, for both of us. Her words hung heavy in the air between them, and Alex's mind raced. What did she mean? Making the choice that will shape everything. The choice. He had made it once already, hadn't he? To run, to leave her behind. But that wasn't the choice she was talking about. The real decision, the one that would define everything, had yet to come. What happens now? He asked, the words tumbling out in a rush, as though his very future depended on the answer. What's the next step? Alia took a deep breath, the tension in her shoulders visibly easing as she met his gaze. Now, we fight. Her voice was unwavering. We fight for Earth. We fight for each other. Alex stared at her in disbelief. Fight? The word felt foreign to him, impossible, yet somehow right. The weight of the world was pressing down on him, suffocating him, but Alia seemed to carry it like it was nothing, like she had been born to bear this burden. He had no choice but to stand by her, to fight for her, for their future, whatever that future might look like. But how? He asked, feeling small, inadequate in comparison. How do we fight something like this? These people, they have technology, powers, things we don't understand. Alia's lips curled into a small, sad smile. You'd be surprised at what you're capable of when you stop running. Her words struck him like a bolt of lightning, a sudden clarity flooding his mind. Stop running. He had been running for so long. From the truth, from the unknown, from the fear of what Alia really was, what she meant. But now, there was no place left to run. What do we do? Alex asked, his voice steady now, no longer trembling with doubt. Stay with me, Alia said. Trust me, we need to find the core of this war, the one that has brought everything to Earth. If we don't, everything will be lost. And then? Alex asked. And then? Her voice trailed off, but there was no uncertainty in her eyes. She already knew what had to be done. Then we finish it. Alia turned and began to walk, her pace deliberate and sure. Alex stood frozen for a heartbeat, his feet unwilling to move, but something inside him stirred, a sense of purpose that had been missing for far too long. He followed her, feeling the weight of their shared mission settle on his shoulders like a mantle. They walked in silence through the ruined streets, the city around them in chaos. But in that chaos, there was a strange sense of peace. For the first time, Alex felt like he wasn't just a passenger in his own life. He was part of something bigger, something that mattered. They reached a quiet, nondescript building at the heart of the city, one Alex had passed 1,000 times, but never noticed. Alia led him inside, and the moment the door closed behind them, the atmosphere shifted. The air felt colder, more electric, as if they had stepped into the heart of a storm. Alia turned to face him, her eyes filled with a quiet intensity. This is it, she said. The heart of the war. We end it here. The weight of those words settled on Alex like 1,000 tons, but for the first time, he didn't feel afraid. He felt ready. For Alia. For Earth. For the future they would fight for. Together. And when they stepped into the unknown, Alex didn't look back.